Whether you're building a new home or adding on, framing up the situation, or putting a roof over your head, if you need to rock it, roll it, or just get on with it, Hometime has a video to help you do it right. Transform your small bathroom into a luxurious master bath, or increase your home's value by updating your old kitchen. Keep your drains draining, your switches switching, and your footing firm. Whether you do it yourself or buy it yourself, Hometime's how-to video guides will help you get the results you want. Will make your next project a success. See your local home improvement retailer for the Hometime video that's right for you.
Look at this bay window. I think that'd work well in our plan.
Oh, that's a perfect application right there.
You think so?
Yep.
Hi, and welcome to Hometime. I'm Joanne Liebler.
And I'm Dean Johnson. Building with logs has been an American tradition since the colonial times. In this videotape, we'll show you what's involved in building a log home by taking you through the peeling, the notching, and the assembly of the logs.
We'll join forces with a log home manufacturer who will work the necessary logs to fit our plan. And we'll show you how they do that at their log yard in Michigan.
Then we'll take you through the assembly of the logs on our cabin site, and we'll finish off the cabin in a rustic style.
We'll get started right after this.
Hometime is made possible by Chevy Truck. Who brings you? Chevy full-size pickups, today's big pickups for professionals and do-it-yourselfers. Chevy S-Series pickups, today's compact pickups that play as hard as they work. Chevy's Astro all-wheel drive, today's mid-size van with standard four-wheel anti-lock brakes. Chevy trucks, the most dependable, longest-lasting trucks on the road. The National Hometime PBS series is made possible by the Stanley Works. Since 1843, Stanley's been committed to building quality tools and other products to help you do things right. Well, welcome to the Northwoods. This is a site we've selected for the log cabin. As you can see, the foundation's in, everything's backfilled. We have the cap on, the front and back porches are in. We had to have all this done before the logs arrive. They're just polishing off the field stone right now. The intention is, once everything's done, we want it to look as though the cabin is sitting on top of a full field stone foundation.
Well, since we didn't have the time or the skills to work the logs ourselves, we're working with a log home manufacturer. They helped us out with the plan, and they built the log shell at their yard. In fact, delivery is scheduled for tomorrow. So even though we're not quite done with the fieldstone work, we're pretty much ready to go.
They'll take care of just about everything that relates to the logs, which is great, because it'll take them about 2 to 3 days to put up the log home, as compared to 2 to 3 weeks if we were framing the home using dimensional lumber.
We're acting as our own general contractors here, which means that after we bought the property, we took care of the permits, the phone, the power, the well, and the septic system. Now, once the logs are assembled, we'll be doing the roof, the windows and doors, and all the interior work.
Yeah, you know, I'm sure those two are for the front porch.
Yeah.
Well, things are really starting to hop this morning. We have our first load of logs, and the assembly crew's starting to unload some of the logs now. They'll be using this boom truck to transport the logs from the truck over to the top of our cap.
Well, some of the logs are over 50 feet long, so needless to say, the boom truck is a great help. In fact, sometimes the biggest problem is just getting it on site. You need a big driveway with a lot of clearance. And the same goes for the log trailers.
The logs were notched and fitted at the log homemaker's facility, and they were tagged and loaded onto trucks for their trip out here. Now, their arrival has been timed, so the first truck that gets out here also has the first logs we need, which are the sill logs. The sill logs are the bottom logs in each wall, and they're cut flat underneath to rest securely on the platform. They're set over a layer of sill sealer material to prevent air leakage where they meet the platform. And the crossing sill logs are half-notched to hide the unattractive ends of the first ones.
Well, all the sill logs are in place, so now the crew is just checking for square. We're taking a tape measurement from one corner all the way to the other, and if the diagonals are the same on this end and on these ends, then they're fine. Otherwise, we'll have to adjust the logs as needed. They did the same thing at this point during the initial assembly at the builder's log yard in Twin Lakes, Michigan. So squaring them here puts them in the same position they were in then, which is necessary for setting the rest of the logs properly. Once the corners are square, the crew drives in 12-inch spikes to secure them to the platform.
Once all the sill logs are secured, they continue putting up the rest of the logs. Now they'll begin with a set that runs parallel like so, and then they'll work with a set that crosses over the top of those. As the full logs go in, you get a better idea of how they've notched the corner joints. They cut the bottom of the upper log to fit over the lower log, which isn't cut at all. They do lay a piece of R11 insulation at each joint as a weather barrier, and the notches can be fine-tuned so they're virtually airtight.
Corner notching is the real key to building a log home. It binds the logs together, and it helps determine the overall look of the home. This is called a saddle notch, and that's a shrink-to-fit notch. What that means is that as the logs dry, they shrink ever so slightly, and that forms an even tighter seam along here. So there's no need to nail the corners together. There are a lot of corners in our design, which combines a main living area 34 by 36 feet with a one-story master bedroom on the side, which is 16 feet square. Adding the bedroom there doubled the corners that had to be notched from 4 to 8. And that adds to construction time and cost, but it gives us an interesting floor plan.
How about do it there?
Yep.
During assembly at the log yard, they notch the logs so the walls are perfectly plumb and square. And they nail in these staples like so on the top and bottom of every notch. Once they're out here at the site, they just align the logs back to these staples, and it keeps everything perfectly plumb and square. The logs are red pine, and their butts average 11 to 14 inches in diameter. Now, the butts are wider than the tips, so they alternate them as they move up to balance the walls. And to enhance the handcrafted look, the log ends run past the notches at random lengths. Other builders cut them to uniform length, but that produces really a less rustic feeling.
Variations in the logs will leave gaps like this. Well, actually, that's to be expected. Now, later on, we'll fill in those gaps with some weatherproof chinking material. Now, you can cut logs to fit snug without any chinking material in the Scandinavian scribe style, but that costs more money and it takes a little bit longer, too.
At the log yard, they provide gaps like this for access inside, but they don't cut out any of the window or door openings. This prevents shifting of the logs at that point. We'll cut out the window and door openings once we get the roof on, but they do reinforce the pre-planned openings with steel rebar. The rebar goes into holes drilled at the log yard. It'll hold the log ends firm once the openings are cut.
Well, that gives you some idea on how the logs are assembled. But let's take it one step further. Dean recently had a chance to visit the Maple Island log yard while they were working on our log home. And he got a pretty good idea of the skill and efficiency that it takes to pull together a project that's this big.
This is where the whole process begins near Muskegon, Michigan. They cut, notch, and assemble all the logs for every home they make. Now, they actually build the home here on location, disassemble it, and then ship it to its final destination. Now, the crews may be working on as many as 7 homes at one point in time. They may have 4 or 5 homes finished and ready for shipment, so it starts looking a little bit like an old frontier outpost. The logs themselves come from the forests of Michigan, but before they can be used to construction, they have to spend up to 10 months drying out in these racks. Green logs tend to shrink when they dry, which is bad for the log joints, so it's best if they spend a little bit of time drying out over there. Then they're also organized and stacked according to length and width. They'll range up to 60 feet long and 26 inches wide. But most logs going into homes will be between 20 and 30 feet long and between 11 and 14 inches wide. Once the logs are dried, they're stripped of their bark using draw knives, which happens to be the same tool used by the pioneers. They handcraft the logs like this to maintain the original shape of the log, with a larger butt end and a thinner tip end. It gives the log home more of an authentic appearance, as opposed to the uniform look you get when all the logs are milled to the same diameter. Once the logs are peeled, crews working on different projects select the logs they need for their plan and haul them over to the site. As you see the crews working in the yard, you'll notice that they're building the roofs on the ground. And they do this for a couple of reasons. One, it's easier to work on the ground than it is up high, and it's also a little bit safer this way. Now, of all the shells you see on the grounds, there's one we have a particular interest in. Let's take a look at it. This is a home they're building for us. As you can see, they're just finishing up the first floor, and they're putting the finishing touches on the roof. All right, this is Mark Bingham. Mark's been supervising construction of the house. Say, mind if I interrupt you a second, Wes?
No, not at all, Dean.
I wanted to ask you one quick question. Has this roof line been a real problem for you?
Well, as you can see by looking at it, Dean, that it has a combination of styles there. One, of course, is the purlin style that goes over the main part of the house, and then we switch to the rafter style out over the bedroom, and it makes for an interesting architectural combination. I think that the architect staff did a good job of making it flow together, and of course the guys with their handcrafting have made it happen.
So by the time we get this thing to Wisconsin, you think that's going to be a real bearcat to finish framing the roof?
Well, it's obviously going to tax your abilities a little bit, Dean, but the base is already set there, and you'll find that that it'll flow through pretty good.
Okay, you'll give us a few pointers, won't you?
Oh, absolutely. We're with you clear to the end.
We're going to need them. I'm going to check out something here on the inside. I'll be right back. I just wanted to give you a closer look at the notching that goes into these log buildings. Now, on first glance, this may look like a hodgepodge of rough timbers, but there's a real art to doing this. Just look at how tightly these joints fit. Now, the notching's all done on our house, but they're working on some of the other buildings. Let's go over there to see how it's done. All right, looks like JB's all set to notch the next one here. Now, he scribed the back of this already. Using a special scribing tool, he's transferring the shape of this log to the bottom of this log right here. The scriber is set at about half the diameter of the log to keep all the overlaps even, and it's equipped with bubbles to show level end plumb, which are crucial in getting an accurate scribe. Now, he also makes a mark on the bottom log to help line up the top log later. With all the notches scribed, JB and his partner Leon turn the log over on its back to actually cut the notches. And they shim the log to keep it from moving during the cutting. They start the notches with chainsaws, cutting grooves between the scribe marks. This log is being notched in 3 places to accommodate the 2 end walls and an interior wall. After the grooves are all cut, the waste wood can be knocked out with a hammer. That leaves a rough notch, which then has to be fine-tuned. At this yard, they use an electric chipping gun with a special gouge chisel bit to smooth out the rough spots and cut a fine line along the scribe. Now, that's what creates the tight seam with the log below. When all the notches are done, it's kind of the moment of truth as far as a fit goes. Nice.
Well, we're going to give it just a little final nudge here.
So what happens if it doesn't fit quite right?
Well, there's just a couple things that we can do here if it's not fitting quite right. We can roll the thing back out and see if we got anything hitting inside the scribe and take just a hair more off. Or we can check to see if there's any knots that we have to buzz through back here to let the log come down just another quarter, half inch.
Okay, but not this time.
Not this time, it's there.
Okay, well, thanks, JB. Nice work. All right, there's just a couple of final steps we want to look at in the process of building a log home. So let's do that now. When the home's completely done, they give it a power wash. They spray on a cleaning solution to remove dust and dirt that collected during the construction process. It's like a high-pressure shower for the log. Then when a log home is clean and ready to go, they label all the logs and load them onto the trailers. They go on the trailer in reverse order of construction. That puts the bottom logs at the top of the load, which is where they're needed when the home is reassembled. Well, that's as far as the building process goes here at the log yard. The rest of the construction takes place at the final destination.
That was 2 weeks ago in Michigan, and it gives you a good sense of how the logs are prepared before delivery. Well, now we're back at our cabin site, and they're putting down more logs on our foundation, and that's where we'll pick it up again.
The first trailer had the initial 1/3 of the logs needed to build our home, and the crew continued working until dusk to finish it, since the next trailer would be arriving first thing in the morning. As general contractors, there's not a whole lot we can do to help out the assembly crew, but there are a few things to do around the site, and that's what we're working on now.
Like the field stone that's mortared in around the foundation? We've collected all that from the property around here, and now we're stockpiling more for the fireplace.
All this debris, well, they had to clear a lot of trees to bring in the road and prep the building site. So I'm just now in the process cleaning up some of that now.
They sure put in a long day yesterday, didn't they?
Yeah, well, that second truck ought to be here any minute now, I would think. Well, they're just about to the top of the first floor. As they reach that point, you'll notice that the wall logs start taking on new roles. Well, for instance, there's one log sticking out here, which eventually will be supported by a post over in this area, will help support the roof as that comes out the back here, as will a tie log running up the center of the building and another log that will come out on that side of the building. Tie logs are used in a log building to literally tie opposing walls together, and they're notched to fit over those walls. They run through the log home's interior, so they're frequently left exposed to enhance the overall appearance. This one carries from the front entryway to the back porch, so it's actually the longest log in our home.
So the boom is at its capacity, huh?
It's about maxed out, as they say.
Yeah. Well, we're well into the second log truck, and things seem to be going pretty well. This is Dick Tuxbury, and he's overseeing the reconstruction of our log home here. Is everything going on schedule?
Everything's going fairly well. The only thing that may be holding us up a little bit are the trees that are on the other side of the house. The boom is having a hard time swinging around them with the logs.
Well, all the same, though, things are going up really quickly.
They are going up quickly. If we try to build this on site, we may be here for 10 or 12 weeks. But the fact that we pre-built this in our log yard in Michigan, we can do things very quickly there.
Yeah, so all your homework makes our life easier.
Right. All the fitting and notching was done there. It was all tried and true.
Yeah.
So it worked well.
So they're working on the joist now, is that right?
They're putting down a layer of joist right now, I believe.
Should we go look?
Yeah,
All
let's
right.
take a look.
In log buildings, logs can also be used to support floors, and our plan calls for log joists under the second floor. They're saddle notched below to fit snugly and cut flat on the top for flooring. But the ends have been left round since they'll be visible even after the cabin's finished.
These log joists are pretty hefty, to say the least. So the spacing between them is a little bit wider than you'd find in conventional framing. And that gives us some leeway in our layout, too. Well, for instance, the spacing between some of these joists varies ever so slightly. And that's because we needed 2 of these joists to fall directly above some 2x4 walls that we'll be framing later on.
Cutting logs is sometimes necessary to remove bad lengths or to cover long distances. The ends are secured with metal strapping, and the splice only goes where it can later be hidden by a notch.
Once all the joists are laid across the logs that support them, the cap logs can be set in place over the joists. They're notched on the bottom to literally cap off the joists and secure them in the structure. They're also the first logs in the second floor walls, which now begin to rise as the assembly progresses.
This is a wall that separates the master bedroom from the rest of the first floor. Now, on either side here, they've created what's called a blind notch. During the manufacturing process, they cut off the logs back here a little short. You notice they don't crisscross like most of the notches in the house do. Then they notch out the backs of these logs, slide them over those logs, and it makes it a lot easier to frame out the doorway. Now, just because these logs are cut off a little bit for the doorway, it kind of leaves them a little bit freestanding. But that isn't a problem because they've reinforced everything with metal rebar.
With a tie log and cap log in place over the back porch, crew members cut log posts to support the ends of the logs. Log buildings often require posts to bear the weight of the logs, and you need footings below to strengthen the posts. They bring extra logs for this kind of posting, and they'll do the installation if your footings are ready. If not, you'll have to cut the logs yourself later on. With the vertical supports in place, they set in the first log purlin.
Purlins are unique to log home construction. Now, typically, they span from gable end to gable end horizontally, helping to support the roof and the dormers. Their ends are tied into the gable end logs, so the structure gets pretty complex, especially because of all the different features we're planning for our roof. In fact, it ought to be pretty interesting to see how they handle the dormers.
They're also moving along on the entryway. These massive 20-inch logs will be used as posts to support the logs here that will form the roof for the entryway.
Because of the weight of the logs, they're using the boom truck to help position them. Now, you don't want rain pooling on the post's upper ends, so they angle cut the tops with chainsaws to drain the water off. And on the bottom, they're set on a piece of treated plywood, which will later be removed as the logs settle.
As evening approached, the crew kept right on moving the logs onto the cabin. But as Dick had predicted, they were falling behind schedule. The crew had hoped to finish up with the second log trailer yesterday, but they ran out of daylight. They're just finishing up those last logs now. The purlins and posts are in position over the front entryway, and here they're building up the gable ends and the roof for the master bedroom. The gable end logs are typically spiked together for vertical strength, which makes it possible to swing 2 or 3 into position at once. These two take the cabin wall up to the same height as the master bedroom's outside wall. That's where the ridge log comes in for the master bedroom roof. It's spiked into position over the house wall, and a saddle is secured over the outside end to match the angle of the bedroom rafters, which can now be installed.
Over the house, log purlins will supply the main support for the roof. But here in the master bedroom, we'll be using log rafters rather than the horizontal purlins. Now, these work basically the same as dimensional rafters, except, of course, due to their size and consequently their strength, we're able to space them a little bit further apart. These will be 32 inches on center. The rafters are notched for the walls and for the ridge log. They're plumb cut on top to form peaks with the rafters coming up from the other side. And they're planed flat on one side to create an even surface for securing the roofing material. After the rafters are all in, short logs are wedged between them to fill the open spaces where they cross the wall logs. And that finishes the second log trailer, so they can move the final load into position.
The truck's arrivals were scheduled for the first, second, and third mornings of the assembly. Delays in reconstruction forced the third truck to wait several hours for the second one to be unloaded, and that adds to the cost of delivery.
As the third truck is prepared for unloading, they're now enlarging the main door openings on the first floor. This will make it easier to move in and out as the construction proceeds. And it's a preview of the cutting we'll be doing later on the other doors and on the windows.
A log stairway was included in our package. They cut and assembled it in Michigan and packed it on top of the third load, so it's the first thing to come off. They're setting it inside for now since the supports for it aren't quite ready yet. They're building up the gable ends now for the next round of purlins. Now, you can build gable ends with regular dimensional lumber, but one of the reasons we went with this builder is because of their use of logs on the ends.
The logs going in now are notched and angle cut to serve several functions. The notched ends will help form the dormers, and the angled ends will support the roofing material. So they're cut to match the 9/12 pitch of our main roof. and there's a wall rising out of the second floor as the assembly continues. The ends of its logs are also framing the roof and dormers. The next log caps off the master bedroom ridge log and raises that gable end up to where 2 more purlins come in.
The purlins extend from gable end to gable end, and maneuvering them through the trees does take a while. They're notched to lock in securely with the wall logs. A second purlin follows the first one. It goes in on the opposite side of the roof. Now the purlins will directly support the finished roof, so they're angle cut on the edge to match the 9/12 pitch. When that's in place, they continue up with the next set of gable end logs, which are spiked together for quick reassembly.
Now we want to show you a couple things inside. Even as massive as this tie log is, we still have to support it with a couple of steel posts. Now these don't exactly match the rest of the wood posts, but that's all right because later on these will be hidden inside an interior partition wall. Now the floor joists up here are supported by these 3 wood posts. The one back here is permanent, but these 2 right here are temporary. They'll come out as soon as we install the stairway, and that goes up once our landing up here is installed. Now this area right here will remain open. We'll have clear story windows up on the roof. This area up here will become a loft, and this wall right here will separate this part of the house from the back here, which will become 3 bedrooms. Up here, they've cut out an access area into the bedrooms. Later on, they'll make this a little bit larger, and it'll become the opening for the hallway. One thing that's kind of interesting is they've taken a chainsaw and routed out the log here. This way we can take our subfloor and just slide it right into that routed opening. And we won't have to scribe the subfloor to the form of the log.
As the end of our 3rd day approached, there were still quite a few logs left, and it became obvious that they wouldn't get finished on this day.
Well, for a variety of reasons, the crew's been losing about 2 hours a day, so it's going to take them about another half day to finish. But luckily, they will finish everything up today. Most of the problems have been related to site conditions. But again, all this adds to the cost of reconstruction.
The dormers are starting to take shape on this side of the roof. The notched logs are in place, which form the dormer side walls, and they'll have the same types of corners as we have on the main walls.
Now as they near the top of the cabin, the logs get a little shorter, so the boom and cable move a little more quickly through the trees. That means they can move pretty fast, finishing the gable ends, the purlins, and the dormer roofs.
Up here on the 2nd floor, this is a dormer that overlooks the front yard. Now we'll be cutting out an opening here to put in a window to let some light into the bedrooms. Now as far as this purlin here goes, what we'll be doing once the roof is all tied in and everything supported is we'll cut this out to expose the dormer, and the weight of the roof will be covered by the outside wall here and the 2nd purlin up on the roof.
Our plans include both gable dormers and shed dormers. The difference is in the roofs. Gable dormers have peaked roofs framed by a log ridge and purlins. Shed dormers have flat roofs that'll rest on the angled logs of the front and side walls.
One thing to remember is that there are many differences in engineering a log home compared to a conventional home, especially the roof. There are a lot of architects that just don't have the background to design a workable log home.
Our log home manufacturer made a lot of changes to our initial plan. Some of our original ideas just couldn't be built. So they helped us make some adjustments that worked for us, but at the same time could be built within the confines of log construction.
And then there was one log that is, the very last log in our assembly. It's the ridge log, which finishes off the very peak of our roof.
The other end, Will.
Well, that winds up a pretty significant step in the construction of our log cabin. Getting the logs on site and then assembled, but there's still a lot of work to do.
In fact, we should get started on the roof as soon as we can. We want to protect the subfloor and interior logs as much as possible.
A few weeks have passed, colder weather's approaching, and we're trying to finish off the exterior as quickly as possible. We've hired subcontractors to move things along on several different parts of the project, like the roof, the staining, and the windows and doors. We'll show you what we've been doing and explain some of the aspects unique to log building.
At this stage, we have somebody staining the logs for us. The roof's coming along pretty well, and we even have some of the windows and door openings taken out already. Now, we'll go through all those steps, but first we'd like to concentrate on the staining process. We're using a waterborne latex stain that comes in several colors. We've chosen a light natural color. Not only is it designed to highlight the grain of the wood, but also to seal and protect the wood from moisture. In fact, Tom Tusek's upstairs working on it right now. Tom's using an airless sprayer to apply the stain. A brush or a lint-free cloth would also work. Now, the surface should be completely dry before application, and it needs about 8 hours of dry weather afterward for proper absorption. We also sanded down all the log ends to close the log grains and contracted another pressure wash to remove all road grime and sawdust.
The stain actually coats the wood fibers to protect them against fungus and mildew. But while it keeps out rain, it also allows any moisture in the logs to evaporate. The manufacturer recommends that the initial coat go on in a two-step process known as a wet-on-wet application. You go over a specific area once to moisten the wood, and then apply the stain a second time to let it soak in and surround the fibers. Then, for optimum performance, another coat may be applied 12 to 24 hours after the wet-on-wet application.
We'll put on another coat of stain next year to cover the shrinkage and the cracking that occurs in any new log home. This waterborne stain weathers gradually, but safely, without harming the environment. So we'll be applying other coats as they're needed throughout the years. And we're also going to be staining the interior logs, but we'll wait till we're done with the finishing work there.
Okay, you've got it in the center there? All right, yeah, this is a pretty good fit down here. Now we'd like to show you some of the elements of this roof, which are quite a bit different from a conventional roof. Well, first off, we put the ceiling boards down first, then we build the rest of the roof up on top of that. So we lay our first 1x6 here at the end of the rafter. This actually becomes the underside of the overhang. Then as we move up the rafters, these boards begin to form the ceiling on the inside of the building.
We're using 1x6 tongue and groove boards that are made out of incense cedar. And this is a little different than the aromatic red cedar that you find in the lining of closets. But it might be a little familiar all the same. It's used in making pencils. And it's also machinable, which makes it good for paneling, for siding, and for decking. The tongue and groove boards already cover much of the roof. They're nailed perpendicular to the log rafters over the master bedroom, producing horizontal seams. But over the main part of the roof, they're secured to the log purlins, creating vertical seams.
We're nailing the boards in face down to leave the smooth side exposed below. To hide the joints between boards, we're cutting them so the joints land right on the logs. And the inside ends run into a routed groove along the gable end, producing a tight fit. We lay down insulation wherever the boards cross the wall logs to seal out weather. And we let the boards run wild over the gable end. When we're done, we cut them all to the same length with a circular saw. Once we get all the 1x6 installed, we want to apply a layer of 30-pound felt as soon as possible. This will protect it from rain and snow and whatever else might happen here in the next couple of weeks, at least until we get the rest of the roof on. And we install this just like we do any other roof project. We roll it out, overlap the edges up here, then staple it down. Hey, Doctor, I have to go back here just a little bit. That's perfect right there.
When the felt's done, you could just put up a layer of shingles and call the roof finished. And that'd work fine in a moderate climate. But here in the Northlands, we need a roof with a little more insulating value. So we're building up from the ceiling boards with 2x8 rafters, and these create spaces for insulation. And we're doing this on the main roof as well as the dormers because we want to insulate every part of the roof, which is where most of the heat is lost.
The rafters are framed 24 inches on center. Now, they don't provide any structural support. It's actually the purlins underneath that frame the roof, and they run from the peak down past the overhang. And we nail on this 2x4 sub-fascia board here. You notice that the 2x8s are notched out to form this overhang here. What it does is create an open area where we can ventilate the roof by running continuous soffit vent right along the overhang like so.
This is rigid insulation called blue board, and it's 2 inches thick, and that gives us an R value of 10. And it comes in 4x8 sheets, but we're ripping it down to 22.5 inches, so it'll fit snug between our rafters.
We're installing 3 layers of styrofoam between the rafters for a total R value of about 30. And even with 3 layers, it still gives us a good inch between the top of the insulation and the bottom of the sheathing, which is good, because in wintertime we're going to need some ventilation here. We need cool air passing up between the insulation and the sheathing to prevent ice dams on the roof.
Over the insulation and the rafters, we're putting down a 1/2 inch layer of plywood. And this step is almost identical to the sheathing on a conventional roof. Once the sheathing's secured, we'll seal the roof with some more builder's felt and then finish it off with shingles.
But there's plenty of work to do before we get to that point. But at any rate, this should give you a good idea of what goes into a roof on a log home. For now, we just want to get this pile of plywood unloaded, and then we're done for the day.
At Hometime, we're always moving from job site to job site, hauling around a lot of tools and materials. So we need a truck that can handle the workload, like the Chevy S-Series extended cab pickup.
This truck is ideal whether we're hauling materials from this construction site or driving down the highway. Its new step-designed rear bumper and lower step-up height make loading and unloading easier than ever.
This 2-tier loading feature lets us expand our cargo space. We can store tools at the bottom and materials on the top. And with these convenient cargo tie-downs, we can make sure everything stays secure.
No matter what kind of load we carry, this double-walled construction protects the truck inside and outside and keeps it looking new.
This extended cab gives us even more space for extra tools or for bringing along a couple of helpers on the tough jobs.
This Chevy full-size pickup 4x4 is another one of our favorites for do-it-yourself jobs. This truck comes standard with a 4.3-liter V6 engine to give us enough torque and towing capacity to clear a couple of trees from this new home site. Okay, back up a couple of more feet.
Also standard are its rear-wheel anti-lock brakes that give you controlled, smooth stopping. That's the kind of security you should demand from any braking system. Chevy's got it.
Even with all the work we put this truck through, it still looks like new. The double-walled cargo box keeps any wear on the inside from showing through on the outside.
And all of Chevy's fleet-side pickup trucks give us the option of 2-tier loading. So we have the option of using the box as is or creating a second loading level. Okay, that's good. Whether we're carrying passengers, hauling cargo, or pulling a trailer, this all-wheel drive Chevy Astro passenger van is the perfect vehicle.
With its combination of all-wheel drive and 4-wheel anti-lock brakes, this van gives us the control we need, even in the worst weather.
In fact, the Chevy Astro van has the largest towing capacity of any van in its class, and its versatility makes sense for every do-it-yourselfer.
The spacious cargo area is ideal for hauling these shrubs or any other material. And with these available Dutch doors, loading is even more convenient. No matter what size of your project, you'll get the job done with a Chevy truck.
They've been a big part of every Hometime project, and it's easy for us to see why the most dependable, longest-lasting trucks are Chevy trucks.
Ideally, you'd want the roof done before finishing up the windows and the doors. But once the paper's on the ceiling boards, you can start cutting out your openings while the roof's being worked on. And we've already marked a window opening here on the dining room wall. We'll cut it out with a chainsaw.
We put in some plywood shims here in between the logs. This way the logs won't sag once we cut out our opening. Now, when the home was manufactured, they put metal rebar on both sides of the window. This helps support the walls. But because we have such a nice lake view here, we took our double window and expanded that to a triple window, which moved this side of the window out past this rebar. So as we cut out the logs, we'll remove this, which isn't really a problem because we'll put bucks along the windows nailed into the logs. Those will help support this wall here. After cutting the logs down one side of the opening, I cut the top log near the rebar. And I've got Dean Doyne to help me here by holding the log as I finish the cut. Then we pull the log out and lay it aside. That's how we remove the larger sections of logs up to the rebar. We cut the rebar with a reciprocating saw. Then we can remove the shorter sections by cutting along the other side of the opening. For the horizontal top and bottom cuts, I run the blade sideways along the marks. And that finishes the opening.
We cut out the rough opening a little larger than recommended by the window maker. That's for two reasons. One is to make room for any further log settling, and two is to make room for the bucks, which go in next.
We're using 2x8s for bucks. They provide the flat surface around the window frame for us to rest our windows against. Now we need these because we can't nail the windows directly against the logs. We'll put the first one in here on the bottom. We'll set it in right on top of this insulation. And once that's down, we'll nail it in place using these 6-inch nails.
To make room for settling, we cut these side bucks 3.5 inches short. We also sawed these slots for the nails. And that way, if the logs should settle, they'll be able to move freely without disturbing the bucks. We also put these washers on the nails so that they can move freely. The top buck then goes over the side bucks, leaving 2 inches above for settling space. Now, some log builders will perform this part of the job for you, but they may require you to mark the walls and have all the bucks ready to go in.
Once the bucks are up, we can go ahead and install the windows. Now, we're using a variety of double-hung casement and awning windows in single and multi-units. We chose this rustic-looking divided light style that was real common in older construction. And this is a triple-wide double-hung unit here.
To cut down on heat loss, the panes are double glazed, so that's 2 layers of glass with a 1/4-inch airspace in between. And we specified a green factory finish and this flat 4-inch casing to enhance the rustic feeling. Now, we did have to do some prep work out here. We notched some of the logs so that the casing will fit flush with our bucks.
We also cut a 3/4-inch groove into the upper log with a chainsaw. That's for the top of the window trim. We sawed in deep enough to leave plenty of space above so the wall won't crush the window as it settles. We're using masonry clips to secure the windows, so we won't have to nail through the finished trim. With help from Dean Doyne, we then set it in place and slide the trim up into the groove. We want the unit level, so we raise it up and shim underneath when the bubble lines up.
That's good, then?
Yep.
All right. Hold her in.
Yeah, I got it. And we nail the clips into the bucks. The upper trim ends up nestled in the groove we cut, creating a smooth finish with the top log.
We cut that last opening, secured the bucks, and installed the window all at once. But you could cut out all the openings first and install the windows later. Just be sure that you put in the bucks as soon as you cut each opening to maintain proper support.
We've got 2 other window styles that we'd like to show you. Well, for instance, our plans call for a couple of these awning windows. And this one is going to be mounted in this shed dormer right here. And that'll provide a little light for the second floor bathroom. And we're also using several of these casement windows. And these have the same double glazed divided light features as our double hungs. So we've got a real mix of windows here, but it'll provide a lot of light.
As the exterior is getting closed up, there are a few projects going on here in the inside. Our electrician, Dan Parent, is starting to run the first electrical circuits in boxes. Now, because the logs are solid, this is a little bit more of a difficult project than if we were working on a conventionally framed home with stud walls. Well, for instance, in some areas of the house, like we're doing here, we actually drill up through the floor, through the logs, and then route out an opening here for each electrical box. After planing the log surface flat for a box, he drills 2 holes with an 1.5-inch bit. That roughs in the opening. Then he finishes it by squaring the corners off with a wood chisel. Down the basement, he drills up with a long 1/2-inch bit. That's after measuring to make sure his vertical channel hits the opening he cut. Then he fishes wire up the channel. The wire will later be hooked up to the service panel. It comes up through the opening and gets threaded through the electrical box. Then we screw the box into the log. The outlet goes in later. The majority of the wiring will come up between 2x4 partitions that we'll build along these metal posts here. And that's how we'll supply power to the second floor. Now, another way to do this is to route out channels in the log ends here along windows and doorways. Of course, it's nice to do this before the bucks are installed.
While we've been working on the roof and the windows, our masons, Tim Tusick and Mike Jameson, have been working on the fieldstone fireplace. We cut away the logs here for the firebox and the chimney. Now they're building up the concrete block interior for the fireplace and the fieldstone exterior as they move up the log wall. This is the same crew that did such a great job on our fieldstone foundation. And again, they're using rocks that have been picked right from the property here. Now, because the weather is so cool, the mortar is slow to dry, so things aren't going as quickly as they could. But they're doing their best to keep the materials warm. Other than that, Tim, how's it going?
Pretty good, Jojo, but we could use some more rocks.
Already?
We're using them up.
Okay, well, I'll tell Dean.
Thank you.
What's interesting about this property is it has this old railroad spur running right up the middle of the property. It's made up of thousands of field stones that were carried up from the lake by laborers, about 100 years or so ago. You can see them kind of laying out along here. In fact, what's kind of ironic is now we're carrying them back down to the lake to use in the fireplace.
Yeah, ironic. Our first snow fell a couple of days later, but by then the roof had been fully enclosed and all the windows had been installed. So we were still one step ahead of the weather.
We'll finish the roof later with concrete tiles. So the last step at this point is nailing down fascia boards to the rafter ends and securing a drip edge.
Okay, we can start installing the French doors here on the back porch. Now, we cut out the opening and installed the bucks the same as we did with the windows. We took the doors off their jambs because they're a little bit heavy. And these have the same double glazed divided light features that our windows do.
Now, we weren't able to go with a factory paint finish, nor were we able to go with a 1x4 trim. So we took the frame the way it was, we removed the brick mold and put on the 1x4 trim. Then we took a 3/4-inch shim and placed that between our bucks here. This will raise the door a little bit off the ground. And we flash that with galvanized flashing that runs down behind this deck board and underneath the deck. This way we don't have to worry at all about moisture getting in underneath the door. Now, the next thing I want to do is put down a couple beads of caulk. One right here and one right here.
Now, we've already notched the logs so that this trim will fit flush. And now that it's caulked, we'll set the door frame in place, make sure that it's centered. Let me get on the other side and take a look.
Okay, let's see. Up on your end down there just a little bit. And then we want to make sure that the door is level here. Okay, right there, that's good. There. And then we want to check this first side here for plumb, and I'll do that using this longer level. All right.
Ah, that looks good.
Okay.
Let's go ahead and nail it.
Now, I'm nailing right through the trim here and into the buck. And that's going to hold the jamb in place. We're not using masonry clips here since the trim isn't painted yet, and we'll be able to hide the marks.
From this point on, the door installation is pretty much the same as in any other construction.
Well, we've gotten a lot accomplished so far. All the windows and doors are in. We've made some progress on the roof. All that's left in sealing up the exterior is to put in the chinking. We'll do that next.
The chinkers arrived a few days after the roof was finished, and they got started as our mason Tim Tusek took a couple days off from the fireplace to pour our basement floor. When the concrete dries, we'll be able to get the furnace in and start heating the cabin.
One of the specialized jobs in building a log home is filling in the gaps between the logs, which is called chinking. We have an expert from Michigan to tell us how this is done, Greg Numador. Greg's been chinking for 8 years. Well, thanks for joining us, Greg. So what are you up to over here?
Well, basically what we're doing is applying first a closed-cell urethane foam in between the logs. And after this process, then we would spread chinking compound over the surface of this.
Okay. Well, what's the insulation value of this chinking?
Well, each chink line gets 2 inches of this closed-cell urethane foam. And that has a good R value, but what really gives you the good thermal value is the airspace that's caused when you have the inside and exterior chinking in place.
Oh, okay.
There'll be an airspace in between the two. Because the chinking adheres tightly to the logs and won't separate from the logs, then you end up with a dead airspace in between, which has a good thermal value and works like a thermos bottle or a thermal pane window would.
Okay, sure. And you do this on the inside and outside?
Exactly the same process on the inside, yes.
Okay. Well, I'll get out of your way and let you get at it.
Alrighty.
Thanks. The backer rod comes in several shapes and sizes to fill the log gaps. Greg's using trap rod, which is shaped like a trapezoid, narrow on one side and wide on the other. After the backer's secured, Greg uses a mortar bag to squeeze out a bead of chinking wide enough to leave a finished strip 1/4 to 3/8 of an inch deep. The flat surface of the backer rod helps ensure a uniform chinking depth along the joint. Now, Greg's method is to empty the bag and then go back and trowel the beads of chinking. It's water-based, so misting with water helps smooth it out, especially with the weather near freezing, as it is here today.
Wow, you're really making some progress. It's looking great.
Well, thank you.
This chinking is a vast improvement over the mortar used in older log homes. Mortar would get hard and brittle, whereas this flexible synthetic can expand and contract with the shifting of the log home. So it always maintains a weather-tight seal. It's resistant to chemicals, salts, moisture, and mildew. And it also comes in several different colors, although we've kind of gone with a light pale gray here to give us the rustic look of mortar. Typically, Greg and his partner start at the top of a wall and work their way down. That's to avoid accidentally marring a finished line of chinking. And the manufacturer recommends immediately wiping off any chinking that falls in the wrong places. Dry chinking is pretty tough to remove. Cold weather can affect the application, so we set up a heater inside to help keep the chinking material workable. And Greg's thermal suit keeps him warm.
One of the main structural elements on a log home are the purlins that run between the gable ends. They provide the main support for the roof above. But we want to cut out part of this one here because it's blocking our view looking out the dormer onto the front yard. And now that the roof's finished, we're able to do that by bolting through this point right here and this point over here. That ties into triple rafters that run up on either side here in the roof. This way we can cut out this part and it won't weaken the roof structure at all. You all set there? Dr. Doyne cuts a log with a chainsaw, first going right down the middle. Now we're taking it out in short pieces since a full log would be too heavy.
It takes a little longer than cutting it out all at once, but this way, we keep the job manageable. Well, it definitely opens things up. Now all we have to do is get these small logs out of here, pull up some of our scrap plywood, and we can start putting down the subfloor.
We've had a lot of nice weather this autumn as we've been working on the cabin, but this afternoon brings us another taste of winter. The snow shower's kind of a hassle for our chinkers, but they're hoping to wrap up here tomorrow, so they're pressing on to stay on schedule. We're going ahead now with the second-story floor, which has to be built up for the heating, plumbing, and electrical rough-in. And our first step in all this was to level off all of these log joists. To do that, we ran string lines over the tops of the joists to see how much they varied in relation to each other and to the first floor. Then with the hammer, we turned the screws on the floor jacks supporting the second floor to adjust the height. We'll periodically check the level as the logs settle and adjust the jacks as needed.
Thanks. All right, well, with that done, we're all set to install our 2x6 tongue and groove flooring. It's made out of incense cedar, the same type of wood we used on the ceiling. And we're actually installing it face down, since it will be viewed from the first floor looking up between the log joists. We're not concerned about the nail head showing, since this will all be covered by more framing and the finished floor. The ends of the boards slide right into the grooves cut into the logs during construction. And the grooves save us the work of scribing the end of each board to match the log.
This subfloor is just the first layer of what we'll be building up here. Later on, we'll be installing 2x4 sleepers all the way across. We'll run all our heating, plumbing, and electrical between them, and then cover them all up with plywood. So basically, we're building a floor on top of a floor. Got that one where you want it?
Yeah, if you could maybe help me down there on that end.
Sure. This is one part of the job that Dean and I can handle alone, but nailing in all the boards does take a while.
Somebody at the lodge said there's over 155 ton of fieldstone in that fireplace.
Are you kidding?
No.
Oh, boy, imagine picking all the rock for that.
We won't have to worry about that one. Say, we're going to have to hold off on these 2x4 sleepers for a while.
What's up?
Now, the plumber was over. He said we should take this 2x4 wall right here, turn that into a 2x8 wall.
But we can leave it in the same spot?
Yep, it'll stay in the same spot.
All right.
And then he'll run all the heating and plumbing up through that to the second floor. And he wants to run all of that before we put down the sleepers.
Oh, so we just frame around his work.
Yep, we just frame around that.
Sure.
And then, I guess the other thing he wants to change is the bathroom.
Despite yesterday's flurries, the chinkers are making good time. They finished the front and the sides of the cabin, so now they're focusing on the back and getting started under the porch roof. Unless the weather gets really bad, they should be able to finish by this afternoon. As the chinkers continue their way around the house, we've got more work happening up here on the roof. Earlier, we built up a layer of insulation between 2x8 rafters, and then covered all of that up with plywood and builder's felt. Well, now we're going to finish off the roof with a final layer of concrete roof tiles. We've got a crew on hand preparing the roof surface for that.
While the tiles are drying at the manufacturers in Oshkosh, the roofers went ahead with building felt and furring strips that they'll need once they start installing the tile. What they're doing right now is installing copper flashing along the logs. This will keep water from penetrating under the logs once the tile's installed. To prepare for the tiles, they're nailing down a layer of 45-pound builder's felt over the lighter felt that was installed before, and that builds up protection against moisture. Then they nail in the 1x2 furring strips that the tiles will lie on, and the strips go on horizontally about every 12 inches. They'll be covering the whole roof like this to get ready for the tiles.
With the end of their work in sight, the chinkers are also up on the roof now, finishing off the gable and the shed dormers on the back side of the cabin. Their craftsmanship really finishes off the logs nicely, and it's a welcome relief inside since the chinking has sealed out the cold wind that was blowing in between the logs. We've gone as far as we could on the second floor, so now we've started framing our first floor stud walls. And that way we can start running our mechanical systems upstairs. Now, we planned our cabin interior so that mainly log walls would be visible from the largest rooms. But we still need partitions between the kitchen and the entryway and the bathroom. And there are aspects of this that are unique to a log building.
Well, for one thing, I'm notching out these cavities wherever a stud wall meets a log wall. All I'm doing is making some saw curves here with a chainsaw. I'll go back and knock these out with a hammer. After I knocked out all the extra wood, I chiseled out a nice smooth area here in the notch. This way I'm all set, thanks Jojo, all set to slide a 2x4 stud in here. Now there's enough room on either side of the stud to slide the wall covering or siding in between. This will make a real nice transition from the stud wall to the log wall. And I'm securing it with washered nails in slots that'll compensate for log settling.
We're making other allowances for log settling. For instance, this stud wall rests directly underneath this tie log. So we need to create slip joints to keep the log from crushing the wall as it settles. And one of the first steps on this is the nailers.
Now this is a standard 2x4 stud wall that you'd use in conventional framing. We just cut the studs a little short here to allow for settling in the logs. Then we attached the bottoms of the studs, we plumbed everything, and then drilled up through the top plate into this nailer up here. And we lag bolted that in place to hold the wall secure. And once the wall's finished here, once we have the paneling on the front, we'll take a trim piece, attach that to the nailer here, and that trim piece will slide down over the wall as the logs settle.
As we continued our work laying out the first floor partition walls, and as Greg Numador wrapped up the exterior chinking, the sun finally popped out of the clouds. Greg headed back to Michigan that afternoon, but he'll be back later on for the interior chinking.
Okay, well the roofers are just about ready to start putting up concrete tiles, and we'll show you that process once they start. Well, inside, we've moved ahead on the framing and mechanical systems. We also collected a few more field stones here for the fireplace and the living room. Now, we framed up the wall over here on the kitchen. We also framed up the walls in the master bath. Now, in here, there's something a little different. We built this wall out of 2x8s. It doubles its width and gives a little bit more room to accommodate the heating runs, the water pipes, and the drain pipes that run from the basement up to accommodate the second floor. Now, this isn't a load-bearing wall, so we're able to take some pretty good-sized cuts out of it. And for log settling, we created a slip joint, pretty much the same as on the wall in the kitchen. And what's kind of interesting is the plumber here has created his own slip joint. He has pipes connected like so, so as the logs settle, they settle right down into their joint. Upstairs, he used the floor system to hide all the plumbing and heating runs. First, he put down the ducts and pipes, then we came back and installed the 2x4 sleepers. This brings the finished floor up to a height that will cover all this. Now, this is the area right here for the upstairs bath. This will be the toilet, the tub will go right over here, and that'll be the vanity. Now, the three silver lines you see right here are the hot air supplies to the bedroom. And this chase right here, formed with 2x4s, is actually the cold air return. Now, we have a couple of runs sneaking around in this direction, one servicing the back bedroom, the other one the middle bedroom, and then the third run is for the front bedroom. And notice none of them cross over the cavity here that we built for the cold air return. Now, the electrician has also taken advantage of the floor being open to run all of his wires. And now that the exterior chinking's been applied, he's run some of his wires in between the logs. This will form a receptacle right here. And later on, the interior chinking will cover up the exposed wires. Well, that should give you a pretty good idea of how we work with built-up flooring to hide mechanical systems. Now, next thing we want to do is lay down plywood to cover all this up. And I'll help Dr. Doing out with that. We put the sleepers down over a layer of builder's felt, which will limit the creaking between the 2x4s and the subfloor. Now, the sleepers function sort of like floor joists, giving us nailing surfaces for securing the plywood. We secured them 16 inches on center, except where the ducts forced us to offset them. We ran them along the logs at the perimeter of the floor so we could nail down the outside edges of the plywood. And to make a tight seal between the plywood and the sleepers, we're putting down a bead of construction adhesive along each 2x4. Well, we got all the plywood flooring down. Doctor's notching out some logs now for another partition wall, and the roofers are starting to put up the concrete tiles. Let's check that out. Now, this is a tile we've selected. It's actually a concrete tile designed to look like slate. It has lugs at the top to catch onto the furring strips, and a hole here to nail into the furring strip. Now, basically, it gets installed like shingles. Begin with a starter course and just work your way up the roof. There's grooves on one side that interlock with the next shingle as the roofers move to the left-hand side. And for the rake, there's a 90-degree tile like so that goes over the edge and just gets nailed right into the fascias you can see right down here. Concrete isn't typically used to cover roofs here in the upper Midwest because of the problems sometimes caused by the frequent cycles of freezing and thawing in the spring and autumn. But these tiles have a very low rate of moisture absorption, which means water won't soak in, freeze, and crack the tiles during freeze and thaw cycles. So they come with a 50-year warranty. On our roof, one of the main challenges is keeping the moisture from leaking in at the valleys between the gabled dormer roofs and the main roof. They've used 16-ounce copper flashing to protect each valley from moisture. They cut the tiles with a diamond-tipped blade to match the angle of the valley, and they nail them in flush with a groove in the center of the valley flashing. The tiles come in 5 different shades of green, terracotta, gray, and brown, but each contains traces of colors of the other. And this is through a unique manufacturing process where the concrete is colored as the tiles are made at the factory. Then the roofers spread them out in random patterns, and this keeps it looking like a slate roof. Our masons, Tim Tusek and Mike Jameson, have been moving right along here on the fireplace. They built a plastic tent around the scaffold. In case we get a cold snap, it'll keep the materials dry so they can keep on working. Why don't we take a peek inside? Well, it is relatively cozy in here. Now, one thing they have to take into consideration when building a fireplace is the fact that the logs will be settling around the mortar. So basically what they have to do is build a fireplace that's completely freestanding. I'll show you what I mean. So where are those guys? Well, they made some pretty good progress. They had to keep the field stone and masonry separated from the logs. So they built in a 2.5-inch gap between the two and stuffed it with insulation. This way, as the log wall settles, the logs can move down along the fireplace and they won't get bound up on anything. Another thing to take into consideration with settling logs is the roof flashing here. The roofers laid down first a piece of copper flashing that comes up underneath here like so. And we took a second piece and cut that in directly to the logs. This way, as a log settles, the top piece comes over the top of the first. It works out great because the two operate as separate independent units. Well, we're starting to frame up the stud walls here on the second floor to form 3 bedrooms and a hallway here coming through our opening. Now, what we're doing is cutting out notches here in the log walls wherever a partition intersects one of those log walls, basically the same way we did downstairs, except up here, we aren't notching out quite as deep for the stud,
But we are making a fairly deep groove here for the 3/4 inch paneling that goes on either side of the partition. So all we have to do now is stick in our slotted studs here on either end. Higher there. Well, we're raising up our first stud wall here underneath this purlin, which should be a pretty good surface to nail everything to. Now, the overall height here is about 11 feet between the floor and the purlin. But we're going to start out here with a standard 8-foot wall and then work our way up from there. Let me get this up over the top here. All right, now we're all set to extend our wall up to the purlin up here with this piece of framing. Now, you notice we cut these cripples just a little bit short. That's to create our slip joint. So what we want to do now is shim this up. Okay, I got this. Get this other side of the shim in here. Okay, now you notice that we're leaving our gap here. That's so we can nail this piece of framing directly to the purlin. All right, so the gap here forms our slip joint. Once these two areas are paneled, we'll nail on another piece of trim to this member right here. And as the logs settle, that piece of trim will come right down over our bottom section. So the next thing we want to do is lag bolt up through these members to keep the wall in line, and then we'll move on, notch out for the next partition. Meanwhile, the roofers are making progress on the concrete tiles, but it is taking a while. The tiles are pretty heavy, so part of the job involves elevating them. They've got a nice setup here, though, with a ladder and a power hoist. After laying out enough piles over the back porch, they start laying that part of the roof.
It took another couple of weeks to finish the concrete roof tiles. Our crew had a lot of cutting to do for the valleys and the dormers, which took a little longer than it would have on a simpler roof. Our masons also finished the outside fieldstone work, capping off the chimney, and that turned out to be a striking addition to the cabin.
Well, Tim and Mike will be back later on in the week to keep working on the fireplace here inside. I'll tell you, we are really happy with the way this fieldstone's turning out. Right now we have a little fire going in here to help temper the masonry. And all the framing on the first floor is done, so we moved ahead with the paneling. Now we're using 1x6 tongue and groove knotty pine, and we're taking it up as far as a slip joint here, which again helps protect the wall when the logs start settling. Later on, we'll cover up that gap with a piece of trim.
Upstairs, the framing's all done, and the plumbing and the electrical runs are all finished. Now, in the bathroom, we used stud walls to run the vent pipes up to the ceiling, so we didn't have to cut away any logs. Now, these are for the toilet and the bath and the fixtures downstairs. And they all converge into this 3-inch PVC pipe, which then turns the corner. From here, it goes up this wall where it merges with the vanity vent, and then the whole thing goes up through the roof to vent outside. We cut through the ceiling boards, the insulation, and the plywood to let the vent through. Roofers provided watertight flashing and cut the concrete tiles to fit. We've also gotten the tub in and hooked up its drain. Now, this one is obviously less than full size, which is actually a better fit up here where floor space is at a premium.
Here in the bedrooms, we did some paneling once we were done with the framing. We incorporated our slip joints in here, but what's interesting is we extended this wall all the way up to the peak, and we did that by cutting 2x4s at the angle of the roof and then nailing this extension to 2x4s that we have attached to the ceiling.
We're doing the bedrooms in the same 1x6 knotty pine that we used in the kitchen, and we still got a ways to go, so we're going to get back to work.
Here's another one for you. Now we're starting to work our way up from the bottom. We've allowed 3/4 of an inch for the finished floor. Now we're putting the paneling up perpendicular to the studs here, so we're forming these horizontal seams. And the paneling goes in groove side down. So this groove goes over this tongue here. Then we installed this 1x here in the corner to give us a nice tight fit.
Nailing through the tongue into the studs secures the boards.
And we keep the nails high so that the groove of the next board hides their heads.
The ends of these boards slip into the notches that we cut where the stud wall joins the log wall. So this gives us a smooth transition from the paneling to the log wall. There we go. To secure the ends, we nail into the studs, but not to the logs, which would create problems with settling. The stud is nailed to the log, but through slotted holes, which will accommodate log settling.
Got one?
Yeah.
Thanks. Well, we're getting closer to the peak as we move up the wall here. Some of these cuts are getting a little more difficult as we're running into the slope of the roof. And we're finding that we have to scribe some of the paneling here to match the contour of the purlins. We also cut in a shallow groove here with a chainsaw so the paneling will fit right in there. All right, we pieced together this section and cut out the back groove of our bottom board here. It's really about the only way to get this up here. So we slide it up like so, and then with this done, we can go ahead and start paneling the bathroom. All right.
It took us most of the day to finish off the paneling, but that gave us some time to do a couple of other projects. For instance, we nailed up some backer board around the tub here, and we sealed the joints with tape and thin-set mortar. The nice thing about backer board is that it provides a real solid surface for ceramic tile. It doesn't deteriorate when it gets wet.
You all done there?
Yeah, I'll give you some room.
You can. For our tile floor here, we'll be pouring a mortar bed, which is a lot easier to level out than backer board. We have builder's felt down here on the floor to protect the plywood from water, and this mesh will help strengthen the overall floor. Now we'll be pouring this floor the same depth as our finished floor out here in the hallway. Get this out of here. As in any tile project, we trowel the mud under the mesh and pack it down firmly. Now this is a combination of Portland cement, water, and sand. Now we're spreading it right up to the logs. The logs will shrink as they dry, pulling away from the mortar and creating a small gap. That shouldn't be a problem on the edge here, where there won't be any traffic.
Say, we still want to get that mud bed down on the first floor bathroom, right?
Oh, yeah.
Okay,
Yep.
I'll get going on that.
Well, it shouldn't take us too long, you think?
Yeah, it's kind of nice to have everything all pre-cut and ready to go.
I'll grab this heater here.
Here you go.
All right, thanks.
Here in the basement, we framed for a third bathroom and an area for the sauna right back here. We had a plumber come and run all the necessary drain pipes before we poured the concrete floor, and we've gone ahead and tiled that floor. We chose a preset pattern of 1x1 mosaic tiles in midnight blue with rosettes of jade and almond. A few days ago, we used thin-set mortar to secure the tiles to the concrete, which provided a level surface for tiling. This pattern comes in sheets pre-spaced for the proper grout lines, so laying the ceramic tile was pretty straightforward. After letting the thin set dry overnight, we finished the floors with grout, working the mixture into the grout lines and wiping the surface clean of any residue. We chose a mushroom color grout here to highlight the darker background tiles. We laid this rosin paper down to protect our new tile floor, and we got this jetted tub in place before finishing our framing. Nailed up some backer board, and then we tiled over the backer board with 4x4 tiles. And these match the almond colored tile that we have in the floor. Later on, we're going to put paneling all over the walls, and it'll match the wood that's in the sauna.
The The sauna itself doesn't require insulation, but we're going to install R19 on all the basement walls because we plan on heating the entire basement. We wanted to get this insulation up before we began the sauna installation. So with that up, we can go ahead and start. Now, because this is a prefab unit, we should be able to put it together in about 90 minutes. The 2-inch boards we're using here are Nordic white spruce, and they're known as logs. That's because they're notched out here on the corners and go together pretty much like a log home. The first thing we want to do is lay out all of our baseboards and get those leveled in. The baseboards are unique because of this notch here, which later on we'll use to pull all of the boards together. There you go.
These piece together pretty nicely, don't they?
Oh, yeah.
You want your base frame to be level. Well, that looks good.
And if your floor's off a little bit, you can just shim underneath the base.
Okay, that looks good there, too.
All right, well, you ready for one?
Yeah, take that end. Now we start putting on the rest of the logs. They've got tongue and groove edges for a snug fit.
The logs are all cut to size at the factory. And the long ones form the sidewalls, and these shorter ones are going to frame the door opening in front. This one has 3 vent holes that are cut into it. They go just above the base. From here, we just work our way up.
This sauna measures 80 by 80 inches, which is large enough for 6 people sitting or 3 reclining. There's no problem setting it over tile, since heat rises during a sauna and the floor stays cool. After the 3rd round is in, we install the threaded stabilizing rods in the holes provided. The following logs then slide down over the rods. In the 5th round, we lay in the wall log with 3 holes for the 2nd vent. Putting it there provides good ventilation.
Adding more logs takes us up to the top of the door opening, which is capped off with a full-length log. From there, we continue up to the top of the sauna. It's 79 inches high to fit under most existing ceilings. The last logs are planed flat on top.
Okay.
Here we go.
With the walls done, we tighten nuts down over the top and bottom of the threaded rods. That draws the logs together and secures them firmly. There is some settling, so you should retighten them after about 4 to 6 weeks.
To support the ceiling, we screw cove molding into the logs 2 3/4 inches below the top. These should be level. We laid a strip of insulated tape across the top of the cove molding, and now we're ready for the ceiling panels. They come in 2 halves, and they're insulated as well.
Okay, you got it there?
Yeah. Now, once we get it in position and all squared up, we'll be securing both halves by screwing into the cove molding.
You over there in the corner?
Yep.
Okay, set it down.
You bet.
Okay. The edge of the 2nd ceiling piece interlocks with the 1st, and they both drop into place. Now that the walls and ceiling are done, we can go ahead and set our benches in place, secure our heater, and hang the door in its opening.
We've nailed up some interior trim around the door here, laid in a couple of accessories, and that is going to do it for the assembly of the sauna. Now, pretty soon, we'll be able to hook up the heater and start enjoying this Finnish national pastime. Right now, we're going to finish the walls.
The manufacturer of this sauna provides Nordic white spruce that matches the sauna exactly. That's what we'll be using in here. Now, we waited till the sauna was in position before we finished framing and paneling around it. That's what we're all set to work on now.
Like the paneling upstairs, these are also tongue and groove boards, which we start at the bottom with the tongue up and nail in perpendicular to the wall studs. But these are 1x4 boards to match the size of the sauna logs. Redwood and cedar are also common in the construction of saunas, but this lighter Nordic white spruce brightens up both the sauna and the surrounding area. We're covering all the walls in this area with the paneling, so it's definitely going to take several more hours down here in the basement.
worked late into the night and finally finished all this paneling this morning. We're just kind of cleaning things up here. The next step down here is going to be to install the fixtures, but that'll come later.
Well, today Joe and I are going to split up duties. She's going to go upstairs and tile, and I'm going to go up to the kitchen and help Dr. Doyne relieve the walls getting ready for the kitchen cabinets. In fact, hopefully we'll even get some installed today.
Well, I've made some pretty good progress up here on the second floor. The 4x4 wall tiles are all in, and I've started on the floor tiles. Now, these are 1x1 mosaic tiles, and they're in the same jade and almond color as the tiles we used in the basement. And since the log surface isn't perfectly square, I've had to scribe along here and nip all these tiles so that they'll fit. I'm setting the edge tiles just short of the logs, leaving a grout space in between to avoid settling problems. The sheets we're using are pre-spaced for an 1/8-inch grout line, and they go pretty quickly over the main part of the floor. This pattern is a classic style from the turn of the century, and it enhances the rustic feeling we're trying to achieve here in the cabin. Well, that does it for this floor. Now it's on to the first floor.
Now, we've shown you several ways to avoid problems with the settling of logs. Now we're going to show you one more way as we install kitchen cabinets on these 2 log walls. Now, you can't screw the cabinets directly into the logs because they do settle. So instead, we'll attach the cabinets to this plywood buffer that's attached to nailers, like you see right here, to remain stable as the logs settle. Now, we have this wall done already. We'll show you how we did this one on this wall here. Now, the nailers get put into notches that we cut out of the logs every 2 feet on center. It's plumb, and it looks pretty flush. All right, for nailers, we're using 2x4s that are ripped to the correct width to keep all the front edges flush. And we're using this string line here to help determine what the width of each one of those 2x4s should be. Then we're lag bolting the nailers to the logs. But before we do that, we're cutting a slot in here so the logs can settle without binding on the nailers. Okay, with all of our nailers up, we can now go ahead and install our plywood on this wall like we did over here. We want this up perfectly plumb, so we'll double check it with level as we go and shim where needed. I'll set that back there. We're setting the plywood on top of a 2x4 we have nailed into the subfloor. That's to keep the cabinets at the same level as the mortar bed and tile we'll have in the rest of the kitchen. Now, you notice that we've stuffed insulation in between the logs. It'll act like interior chinking and also beef up our R value a little bit. Now, to prevent a binding problem when the logs settle, we'll be screwing through the plywood directly into the nailers and not the logs. And once we have all of our plywood up here, we can start installing the cabinets. Say, Joe, you going to be ready to help out then?
Yeah, I got just a little bit left here. For our master bathroom floor, we've chosen a mix of Raven and Adobe mosaics. These are going to match our fixtures. The design, however, varies quite a bit from our others, but it's still reminiscent of the late 1800s. I just line up the tiles, push them into place, and set them. There. Now we'll just let the tile dry overnight, and tomorrow it'll be ready for grout.
So you're all done, huh?
Yeah, what do you think?
Oh, it looks real nice. I like your timing, too. Now you can help out in the cabinets.
All right, I'll be there in a second.
We'll begin by installing the upper cabinets, starting with this corner unit over here. Now, the cabinets are made out of birch, and the shaker style we've selected, along with some of the doors here with these wire mesh grills, gives it a real country sort of look. The first thing we want to do is pull all the doors off here so we don't have to worry about banging those up.
And we're pre-drilling holes in the cabinet backs for securing them. To keep the cabinet straight, we drew in this level guideline, and this is where the bottoms of the upper cabinets are going to hit. And the way we found this measurement is we measured up 84 inches from the highest point in the floor, and from there we measured down 32 inches, because that's the height of the cabinets. And that is where they're going to hit.
I'll sit here.
Yeah, let me just get this in place.
Get this up here on the line. Hold on just a second, once.
Tell me when you're ready.
Okay, it's right there. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, 2 screws will hold it up long enough for us to check it for plumb here. If it needed a little adjustment, we could shim it. But with the plywood up here, we're just fine.
Here you go.
Okay. Thanks. We're using 1 5/8 inch screws. They're short enough so they don't go into the logs, but long enough for good support.
We use the level line to position our next cabinet, which is deeper than the first. After securing the back, we screw through its side into the first one's face frame. Then we line up the plate rack unit, which is flush with the second one.
Right there.
Wood clamps hold them in position while we secure the backs and the frames. All right, well, we've set in a couple of more cabinets to get us to the end of the row, and these all went in pretty much the same as the first one. However, we did leave a 4-foot gap right here, and that's to accommodate the range in the vent hood we're installing later.
I cut in a vertical notch here through the logs along the plywood, and that should help hide our nailer later on. You all set there?
Yeah.
Now, we special ordered this cabinet with an extra long return here along the backside, which should fit right in here and hide everything nicely.
This cabinet is 16 inches longer than the others, which means that its bottom is going to rest on top of the counter. And since we may have to adjust it later on because of this, we're just going to secure it temporarily right now. What do you say we screw this in and break for the day?
Oh, I could go for a real nice dinner. How about you?
Oh, that would be great.
All right, all the tile's dry, so we're grouting the tile in this bathroom and the one upstairs before we move into the kitchen. Now, we're using a toast-colored grout here, which would go real nice with the adobe-colored tile here in this pattern. What I'm doing is just working it into the lines between the tile here, like so, and then scraping off the residue.
Here in the upstairs bathroom, we're using the same mushroom gray-colored grout that we used down in the basement. And I'm being very careful to fill in any gaps between the logs and the tiles. Well, I'm all done upstairs. Are the shims ready?
Yeah, they're all set to go. Here, grab me into that guy. Got it? Okay, here, I'll go backwards. I went ahead and installed our 2x4 nailer here to bring the height of our base cabinets up to what will become the height of our finished floor. And the frame of the cabinet we're installing here will form a 90-degree angle with this cabinet underneath the window. So we ordered it with an extended face frame to form that joint. Now we want to shim our cabinets up to the level line that we drew here earlier. Okay, let me get that underneath there. Can you push that up one
Sure.
second?
Oh, you're darn
Okay, that's
close.
perfect
Yeah.
there. Let me get this one. All right.
And we secure the back to the plywood through the fastening rail. Now, this cabinet arrangement leaves us with a dead space in the corner, but that'll be covered up by a countertop. Well, now we're ready to install the 2 narrow cookie sheet cabinets that are going to go on either side of the range. Then we'll just work our way down the row. That gives you a good idea of the steps you take to install cabinets against a log wall. The cabinets along the other log wall go in the same way, and those along the partition wall are installed the same as in any type of construction.
That is a nice fit.
we're all done with the kitchen cabinets. We've installed the units here on the center island and those that are along the partition wall. Now we can go ahead and move on with some other finishing touches in the rest of the cabin.
Now, we've been working on the railing here for the stairway and the loft. The log cabin manufacturer fabricated the stairway in Michigan, then provided these logs for us to assemble the railing.
We've got one stretch of railing left here along the basement stairs. Now, we've already attached the shoe rail to the newel post using dowels. And we put more dowels here in the shoe rail. And the spindles, which have been pre-drilled, just fit over the dowels. Ready for this?
Yep.
All right. When those are in, we glue on the handrail, which we drilled to go over the dowels and the spindles. Now we move the assembly into place against the log stringer. We'll finish the last two spindles after securing it. We also plan on building a railing around the back porch here and the front entryway, but we're going to wait until spring to do that.
One key to building a log structure is staining the logs to seal in their natural beauty and color. Now, we've done most of it downstairs, but we do have a little bit left to go here upstairs. Now, we've sanded all the logs already and brushed and vacuumed off all the dust that tends to accumulate on the logs. We also covered up this window here to protect that. Now, if you don't want to spend hours shampooing your hair, it's a good idea to cover up your head. So we'll just start working from the top and just come right on down. We're using a low-pressure garden sprayer to coat the logs. The exterior was stained with the same light natural shade last fall, but this is a different formula. The exterior stain has a fungicide and a mildewcide, which will make it unsuitable for use inside. The exterior formula has ultraviolet inhibitors, which the interior product does not. If your interior logs get a lot of direct sun, you can specify that the inhibitors be added to your stain. After spraying, we brush the stain in to eliminate runs and to really penetrate the wood. And along with the logs, we're also spraying the ceiling boards with the same stain to keep the color uniform.
We finished staining the logs here in the great room a couple of days ago. And as you can see, the masons have finished our fieldstone fireplace. And they used rock collected from the site here. Now, one concern was to separate the stones and the mortar from the logs to prevent binding as the logs settle. So, we can get a look back here. They nailed plywood to the logs through slotted nail holes, and then attached the masonry to the plywood with brick ties. The slots will let the logs and the nails slide down freely as they settle, while the masonry stands firm. And chinking will later finish off this edge.
Okay. Finishing the window trim is another part of the project. The first step on each window is bringing the jamb out even with the 2x8 bucks. All right, now we've notched off the side of our logs here flush with the bucks, and our 1x4 trim gets nailed to the bucks and the extension jambs, but again, not the logs. That could cause binding as the logs settle. We're not countersinking the nails, since some of the trim may be taken off temporarily when the windows are chinked. On top, the trim covers the settling gap between the buck and the log, and we're leaving a 1/4-inch reveal on the extension jam.
Right there. Now here's kind of an interesting treatment. We took this leftover log, custom cut it, and then slipped it over the end of the partition wall, kind of like a log trim. Now we're also going to be covering up the slip joints that we built into our partition walls to accommodate the log settling. We're securing the trim above the gap and not below, and that's so the trim can slide down freely over the lower part of the wall as the logs settle.
Okay, well, that takes care of that one. Now, along with the trim work, we're also hanging the doors. Now, we have these doors made using the same 1x6 pine that we use for our partition walls. And the hinges that you see on here are made out of black iron. It's the same type of hardware you'll see throughout our log cabin. We're also using black iron screws here to attach the bucks to the front of the door.
The door jambs go in the stud walls the usual way, but it's a little bit different on this log wall that encloses the master bedroom. For one thing, we installed a 2x6 buck to support the jamb, and we left this gap up here to accommodate any log settling. Now we can just hang the door.
Okay, lift.
Let's see, that's how to do it. This morning, we've been working upstairs on this antique white pine flooring, which will really add to the rustic style. Now, the wood's age makes it very dry, so it's been airing out for over a week, acclimating to prevent problems after installation.
This wood's unique because it's taken from old buildings and then milled into random width tongue and groove boards. We know this wood comes from a couple of 19th century barns, one from Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, and another one from Frederick County, Maryland. In fact, if you look at the back side of the boards here, you can still see the old paint. Evidently, this one was white at some point in time. We're using a rented floor nailer to secure the tongues of the boards. We've got rosin paper below to limit squeaking. To account for seasonal swelling, we've left gaps at the log walls that'll later be chinked.
Over the next few days, we're going to finish up the wood flooring in the bedrooms and the dining room and the great room. And we've got a mortar bed in place here in the kitchen for another unique material, terracotta squares. Now, these should be delivered over the next few days, about the same time as we get our granite countertops.
And that's when the chinkers, who did the exterior, will come back and finish the inside of the logs. They'll cover up all these wires that Dan Perrin, our electrician, has finished running up from the basement.
He also hooked up the sauna, so that's ready to go. And we've got heat in the house now that the furnace has been hooked up. Now, this forced air model is powered off a propane tank that's buried outside. And we're keeping the basement heated to about 40 degrees all winter, even when we're not here. And that's so we won't have to drain the basement pipes every time we leave to keep them from freezing and bursting. We will drain the upstairs pipes, though.
We'll be insulating heavily down here in the basement to conserve fuel. We'll be using fiberglass insulation between the ceiling joists and in the wall. And we'll be installing this as soon as we get some of our junk cleaned up down here. And on the outside of the foundation, prior to backfilling, we installed this styrofoam insulation. So this way, when we go home and we shut all the heating vents upstairs, we'll still be able to heat the basement, but conserve fuel at the same time with all this insulation taken into consideration. Well, now we can move on to the plumbing fixtures.
This is one of the last steps in the basement, installing the bath fixtures. We chose a traditional style for the tub, pedestal sink, and the toilet, but they're not old-fashioned. The toilet is a water saver, only using 1.5 gallons per flush. And the Whirlpool tub has controls that you can set to automatically fill at the depth, temperature, and time that you want. We've got several subcontractors coming in the next few days, so our plan is to finish all the plumbing fixtures today and most of the lighting fixtures and hardware tomorrow, before the subs start coming.
In our upper bath, we chose the same style toilet as in the basement. But here, the tub and vanity hardware is finished in brushed chrome with ceramic handles. For the vanity, we had a great idea. We thought, why not get an antique washstand, cut a hole in the top of it, and then, I can get this out of here, place the sink right in the hole. Well, obviously, we've got our sink, but because we've been pretty busy, we haven't been able to go antiquing. So that'll have to wait a while. But that's why it's nice having a couple extra bathrooms in the place.
For the master bath, we chose new fixtures with antique styling. The Victorian tub is cast iron with polished brass drain, faucet, and handles. The freestanding installation let us bring the plumbing through the floor and avoid cutting any logs.
The tank for this old-fashioned pull-chain toilet gets attached to this wall here. And of course, we don't want to attach it directly to the logs because when they settle, they could crush the plumbing that goes underneath here. So instead, we notched this log into the wall and then we'll attach the tank to this plywood that we've put up here. Okay, this way the logs can settle around it, and we don't have to worry about anything getting crushed. Okay, just a little bit more. Well, we wrapped up all of our plumbing fixtures yesterday, so we can start hanging our electrical fixtures today. Now, the electricians ran all the wiring when they did the electrical rough-in, so we're all set to go.
We chose fixtures of antique brass, handmade in Maine, with the look of old-fashioned lanterns. In fact, the glass on this onion globe is a style that was popular in colonial New England.
On the back porch, we put up a pair of teardrop-styled lamps modeled after the street lights used in Brooklyn 100 years ago. This cottage light will eventually be hung from our porch ceiling out here. Unfortunately, the electrician hasn't roughed it in, and we don't have our ceiling boards up anyway. And once we get our junk pile cleared out in front, we'll stick a post in the ground and attach this Cape Ann light. We'll use this as an approach light. But again, that'll just be one of those projects we'll have to do later on. Well, it's a little high up here, and we've had a bit of a challenge installing these ceiling fans in the vaulted area in the great room. Both fans have this rustic verdigris finish and pine blades, so they fit in here beautifully. And the electrician did a real nice job in hiding the wiring by running it along the top of the purlin, drilling down into the fan fixture.
The fans will be controlled at ground level. They'll keep the cool air circulating in the summer, and in the winter, we'll reverse the direction of the blades to blow down and keep the warm air from rising into the vaulted ceiling. We're putting a third fixture up in the vault. This large onion globe lamp will light the stairway area. In the dining room, we're hanging a colonial tavern chandelier. And we're mounting colonial wall sconces in the hallway upstairs.
Well, now that we have all of our ceiling fans up, we can install some more hardware. The hooks back here are for our fireplace tools. Now, these are hand-forged black iron. It's an early American style that we're using throughout the cabin.
After the hardware, we had a few hours left in the day to work on the antique flooring in the great room and dining room. It's slow going, but we made some progress. A few days have passed now, and Greg Numador and his partner have returned from Michigan to finish chinking the interior logs. They're using the same techniques as they did on the exterior logs last fall. First, they fill the gaps between the logs with strips of backer rod. Then they squeeze the flexible chinking material over the backer and smooth it out with trowels. It'll take them a couple more days to do all the logs, so we'll check back when they're farther along.
Well, we moved ahead here on our terracotta floor. These are thick, hand-molded tiles from Italy, and they're heavy clay and not exactly recommended as a do-it-yourself project from the manufacturer. So we had our tile setter, Joe Kerber, handle this job. He spread a thick layer of thin-set mortar, combing in 3/4-inch ridges. He set the 12 by 12 squares with a 3/8-inch grout space, and he beat them into the mortar with a mallet. Now, the surfaces are irregular, so the trick is to keep everything level.
On the walls, we set ceramic tiles, and this job was a little more straightforward, so we handled it ourselves.
The tiles are hand-painted in Spain, and they feature the design of fruits and vegetables that you might find in a typical country garden. The full tiles are framed by smaller border tiles. Organic mastic is used to secure them to the plywood under the cabinets. And we laid them out with enough room below for the countertops and the backsplash. Well, I'll go finish in the entryway.
Okay. Now for our wall tiles, we're using white grout, but for the terracotta here, we're using a natural gray. We're just working the grout into all the spaces and then sponging off the excess.
In the entryway, we also have terracotta squares on the floor. They're unglazed tiles, which can absorb moisture. So we've mixed the grout fairly dry and applied sealer to protect them from the grout and from stains.
After grouting, we covered the floor to protect it as the countertops go in. Now, we ordered granite, and we've gotten some help with the installation from Larry Eisenschink, Dean Doyne, and Jeff Villers. Now, this is a traditional black granite flecked with green and polished to a glossy finish. It was fabricated in Cold Spring, Minnesota, using cardboard templates we scribed here.
To secure it, they first spread glue over the base cabinets. Then they set the sheet in place. We had to remove the taller end cabinet here to get the granite in. It's heavy, but it's strong and stain resistant, which minimizes upkeep. It's tough to get an exact fit, so some maneuvering is needed. The granite backsplash is set over the top and glued to the plywood, fitting right under the tile. Then the cabinet can go back in. Now this will take several hours, so we'll do some other work for a while.
Well, we've moved along on the pine flooring here. We're now working in the master bedroom area. We should be finishing this up fairly soon, but we won't actually be working on the last step for some time, and that's the sanding in the ceiling. By mid-afternoon, the chinkers had finished the fireplace area and began moving along the great room walls. Now, they're covering the wiring as they chink the gaps, and they're boosting the R value between the logs by adding backer and the chinking.
And in the kitchen, they finished the granite countertops along 2 walls and started on the island. There's an opening cut in the first piece for the island sink. The second piece rests on a set of legs, extending the top of the island for a small eating area. All right, we're done with this part of the floor, so we can cross that off our list. And the countertops are done, so we can finish up in the kitchen. Our next step there is hooking up the sinks.
We set a double stainless steel sink into the opening under the windows. We've equipped this one with a combination single control faucet and pull-out sprayer. The island bar sink is black enamel cast iron with a high arc polished chrome faucet and antique styled handles.
The chinkers finished the great room yesterday. This morning, they've begun working their way through the dining room.
Well, with a little bit of help, we got our range position in the spot we left here in the cabinets. We decided to go with a low-maintenance stainless steel finish. This is actually a commercial range adapted for residential use that literally could last generations.
This is a great stove for a gourmet chef. In fact, we'll have more time to do that kind of cooking here at the cabin than we would at home. In the dining room, we'll be hooking up this black enamel cast iron stove.
Now, the stack for this wood-burning unit will run up straight, take a 90-degree angle out the wall, and then run up on the outside of the building. And it will help supplement our heat on really cold winter mornings. Plus, it's just part of the cabin experience. Okay, let's see. Let's get out first.
One of the finishing touches here in the kitchen is to put the hardware on the cabinets. Now our poles have the same finish as the cabinets, and they're made out of wood, which kind of goes with our country kitchen feeling.
As we wrap things up in the kitchen, the chinkers finished off their work too. It took them about 4 days total to finish the interior logs, a day longer than the exterior. So this is all you have left here then, huh?
That's it.
Yeah,
Okay.
well, you did a great job again.
No, we
Thanks.
really appreciate it.
Yep.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, take care.
Yep. Enjoy your house.
Yep,
We'll
drive
see ya.
carefully.
Well, a few months have passed, and we've gotten a lot of finish work done here in the log cabin. Now we're back to finish up the last couple projects on the list. Say, how's breakfast coming?
Oh, just about 10 minutes. You want to start on the coffee?
Sure, I can do that.
All righty.
What are we having?
Pancakes.
Pancakes, great. Love them.
We'll just show you highlights of most of the work that we're doing on this trip, but then we'll focus in on elements that are unique to log home construction as we head toward the finish.
French roast all right?
Absolutely.
Okay. That's what I'll make. Here's another one for you.
All right.
Well, we're just finishing up a project we have left over from our last trip. We put in a stairway and a railing made out of log rails and spindles. Right, I just cut one more spindle here for the section we're installing over here.
This is the handrail for this section, and we're going to be doweling and gluing the spindles into holes that we'll drill on the underside. That part's pretty straightforward. What's been difficult is scribing and then cutting the ends of the rail to fit snugly against the rounded logs. But anyway, this handrail's taken care of, so now we'll move on to the shoe rail.
With our shoe rail scribed, we glued our spindles to the rails, and now we can attach the whole thing using galvanized screws. Okay, you could put a little pressure right against that. After screwing in the end of each rail, we'll get started on the other side. Well, I'm glad we have the stringers and treads already cut for the back, you know.
Yep, well, we ought to be able to fly right through that. We're using the same techniques and materials here on our back porch stairs that we used on our front. Now, each of these jacks is a pair of 2x12 redwoods that have been screwed together and then cut to a rise of 7.5 inches and a run of 10 inches.
Well, the tread should be strong enough. We're using a pair of 4x6 redwood, spaced about 1/8 of an inch apart, and we'll be securing these to the jacks using 6-inch galvanized screws. Now, first thing we want to do here is pre-drill the treads. Okay, press it in the adhesive.
Check the overhang. My way, bit. Good.
Well, we're almost finished. Now, because we aren't installing risers, once we get this tread in, we're done.
We also want to install railings along the stairs and around the entire deck. That's a job that's going to have to wait until we have a little more time. So, it's on to the next item on our list.
Well, we're taking some time now to inspect the logs for checking, which is a cracking and splitting of logs after they've been up a few months. It adds character to the building. At the same time, it can let moisture into the logs, which could rot them. So to take care of the really big ones, we're using this caulk-like material that flows into and seals up the crack. Dab it on with a paintbrush. And wipe it off with a clean rag. There we go.
Now, you don't have to concern yourself with all of the cracks. For instance, water can't leak up into cracks that are in the bottom half of the log. It's just the big cracks in the top half of the log you need to worry about.
Water can seep in at the log ends, so we're also going to add a little here to seal up the end grain. On a big house like this, that can be a lot of sealing, but it'll help the logs last that much longer.
Another thing to check is the chinking between the logs. Now, we used a synthetic material that adheres tightly to the logs to prevent leakage. But sometimes the chinking will crack or it'll pull apart as two logs settle differently. But we can fix it by just putting in more chinking. It's like filling a plaster crack with spackling. First, you make a clean groove with a utility knife. Trowel in enough to fill the crack. And then smooth it out. It's waterborne, so you can mist it to help feather the new material into the old. And finally, you should clean off any chinking that gets on the logs.
Last fall, we had Tom Tusek put on the first coat of exterior stain to protect the logs from moisture and to seal them. Now, the manufacturer recommends that you put on a second coat after the first coat is dried. So, that's why we brought Tom back to put on some more stain. The stain comes in several colors, but we're sticking with the natural tint we used last year, which barely changes the log color at all.
You can also brush on this stain with a wide paintbrush. And the best technique for this is to brush it on in one direction and then back brush it to really get it to penetrate the wood fibers. However, this is really just a demonstration. In order to save time, we're going to let Tom do all the staining with his power sprayer. We'll just move on to our next project.
Our next job is putting together some log furniture we ordered from Colorado.
These are lodgepole pine logs, so they go well with the light pine logs we've got in the cabin. And the manufacturer drilled out the holes and then labeled the pieces for easy assembly. So we just match up the holes to the right logs, and then we'll secure them with lag screws.
So with this frame put together, we can go ahead and finish the rest of the room.
Want to help me with this mattress?
Yeah. Grab that in there.
Wait a minute. 1, 2, 3.
Off we go.
Oh.
These things are hard to work with, huh?
There, that looks nice, doesn't it?
Oh, this looks great.
Well, I suppose we should get those bunk beds put together, huh?
All right, I'm right behind you.
All right. Down to the last lag screw here.
There you go. Well, this bunk bed even comes with a log ladder. So, you know, we aren't doing too bad in terms of time here, you know that?
Yeah.
Okay. We should be able to get that dock yet today.
Yeah, it's a nice day for it anyway.
2, 3.
We're using 4x10 dock sections that have aluminum frames and cedar decking. And they're kind of awkward to move at 10-foot length, so we got a little extra help.
Each section of dock comes with a pair of adjustable legs with cross braces in between. We adjust these to the water's depth once we have them in the water, which is our next step.
Now the legs are just on one end. The other end attaches to the dock section that's before it, so it works kind of like a chain.
Now we've got 4 sections of dock in already, and this 5th and final section will go out to the left, forming an L.
To get the section in place, somebody had to get wet. John and Bill volunteered. Thanks, guys.
I'm under a log here.
Slower and down.
When it was set, the lip on the end locked right into the slot we secured on the previous section.
All right, well, I guess all we have to do now is get those adjusted and bolted down and we're done, huh?
Yeah. Oh, here, let me get the hardware.
No, all right. I'll tell you,
Here.
we sure appreciate you guys doing this today. This is a big help. Don't walk out on that thing. Nope.
Well, looks like you got a lot done.
Well, Jojo, this half's ready.
Yeah, good. You gonna be there Sunday?
You bet I will. Be there, be square.
All right, 3 o'clock.
then.
Take care. How's it going here?
Oh, not too bad. I'm just putting the cover on. Say, do you have needle nose pliers?
Yeah, my tool belt. I gotta go find him.
Did Tom finish up?
No, he's gotta come back next week.
Okay, well, I guess that makes sense. Well, last fall when Tom put on the first coat, he was able to do it in a few hours. But now that we have all the windows and doors and all the chinking in, he has to be a little bit more detailed, so it's going to take longer. But he should be able to finish up next week.
Here you go.
All I have to do now, thanks, is finish up the grill here. We can finally have some supper.
Hey, how was the picture?
Oh, not too bad. I got enough for lunch. How was your walk?
Oh, I got some great shots.
The light was perfect.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
Well, it's a gorgeous morning.
Yeah, it is.
Well, this morning, Jojo's going to be putting up some wood blinds, and I'm going to be painting some doors here. Last fall, when we ordered our windows, we got what the manufacturer calls a FlexCron finish on the outside. It's a lot more durable than the enamel finish you can put on after the fact. Unfortunately, it wasn't available on the doors. So what the manufacturer did was give us a formula to match the color. We mixed up a can of that, and that's what I'm going to be putting on this morning. I'm using an oil-based enamel, which will give us a smoother finish in a latex. And I'm working with a trim brush here to put our first bit of paint on the casing. I'm starting to cut in along here underneath the log. This isn't difficult, but you do want to go nice and slow. If I get paint on the logs, that's going to be difficult to clean off. In fact, I'm sure Joanne will probably have the blinds done before I'm half done here.
We've got a lot of windows in the cabin which let in the light and provide us with views of the lake. But all this glass sometimes makes us feel like we're living life in a fishbowl. So, to give us some privacy, we're putting up some 2-inch wood blinds on some of the windows. These are handy because the lift cords can be on either side of the window, and they're easy to install. Hardest part is just getting them out of the box sometimes. Let's get a better handle on this. The ends of the blinds will slide into brackets, which I'm screwing in flush with a trim. There, 2 screws ought to do it. Now, because this blind is kind of wide, I also screwed in a center support. Now, with all the brackets in, I can jockey the headrail into position, going in one end at a time. There. Now I lock the headrail into the bracket and put the wand on. These wood blinds come with a matching valance, and we chose a light pine finish to match the interior stain, but there are other colors available. I'm making pretty good time here. Hey, can I come through?
Sure, come on.
All right. How's it going anyway?
Oh, not too bad. It's going slow, though, I'll tell you that much.
Oh, yeah. Well, I'm all done with the blinds. Do you want some help?
Yeah,
In fact, if you want to grab a brush and go out and back, that would be great.
Okay,
It's still
sure.
a little wet there.
Can I take this bucket?
Yep, go ahead. Well, I'm all finished up here in front. I took the windows out of the jamb so I could do a much more thorough job painting them. I'll just let them dry here. Now I can run back, see how the old gal's doing.
Well, that's one coat down, one to go, huh?
Yeah, I'll tell you, I don't know when this is going to dry. We might have to finish it next weekend.
Oh, that's no problem. Say, did you ever clean those fish?
Not exactly, but I tell you what, if you take care of the brushes, I'll take care of the fish, all right?
Sure.
Okay.
Well, these ought to be warm enough by now, huh?
Yeah, the fish is done. Pull this out. Boy, it's gorgeous out here, huh?
Mm-hmm. You know, I think I might go for a swim.
Okay, I'll take care of these.
Thanks.
And I suppose we should get something done inside, huh?
Yeah.
Our refrigerator slid right into the opening we left for it in the cabinets. But to really get it to tie in, our cabinet manufacturer supplied these panels made in the same shaker style.
To install the panels, we first removed the handles, and then we slid these adapters into the trim. And the panel slips right into the adapters. Need some help?
Got that.
All right. Now, to lock it in place, we'll put in 2 more adapters on the remaining sides.
There you go.
Lift that right up. All done?
Yep.
Doing okay here?
Yeah, not too bad.
All right.
Well, we wired the entire log cabin last fall, but we didn't get all the light fixtures hung. So that's what we're taking care of now, putting the last few up. But of course, before we started working on this area, we turned off all the power.
We decorated this bathroom with antique-style fixtures. A pedestal sink, a pull chain toilet, and an old-style tub. And now to maintain that look, we're going to put up these copper wall sconces.
You got the wire nuts there?
That I do.
Great. Get these all twisted together. So you have any more light bulbs there?
Yeah, I'll get them for you in just a second. I'm just about done with these.
Well, we're ready to finish off our second floor bath. It's been delayed until we could find just the right antique for the vanity. And we've got it, so we're all set to go. Okay. Let's see if Easy does it. Say, I never tell you did a nice job of finishing this thing.
Well, thank you. Now, what we've done with this antique chest of drawers is we've taken the top off, and then I've run a bead of caulk all along the rim. And that's what we'll use to secure our new countertop.
There you go. Got it. And for the top, we're using Corian. We ordered it in a bone color, so it would match our fixtures and the tile. We had a hole cut in for the sink. Now we just want to set it on top of our caulk.
Okay, about how much overlap do you have on your
I
side?
have about an inch.
An inch?
That's what
Okay.
we need. Okay, seal that thing in real good.
Okay, we've got the faucet, the handles, and the drain all put together. So now we can just set the sink in the opening. Coming through.
Okay, got it there?
Yeah.
All right, I'll help you guide it in. All right, so once our sink's in here, all we have to do is attach the drain, waste, and vent and copper pipes on the bottom of the cabinet. All right, there we go. But we can do that whenever we get around to have a bathroom downstairs we can use. Now, adapting an antique like this definitely takes a little bit while longer. It slowed us down a bit, but I think it's definitely worth it for the application. All right.
one thing about this site is it has just tons of rocks. We put them to good use on the fireplace and foundation, and now we found just one more good way to use them.
We've been working on this stone walkway in front. We've been finding rocks that are flat on one side and look as though they kind of fit together. Yeah, that'll work. And then we just embed them in the sand.
A sidewalk like this isn't going to turn out perfect, but we're using a level from time to time just to keep it relatively level with the footing up by the stairway. Or at worst, just have it slope away a little bit from the stairs. Now, we just have a few feet left to go, so we should wrap this up in no time at all. Well, that bird looks tasty. I'd give it about another half an hour.
Yeah? Well, I suppose we better get the rest of the food on then, huh?
Yeah, we probably ought to set the table, too.
Okay, well, give me 2 more seconds. Okay. There.
All right.
I'll meet you in the back.
Oh, great.
Tell us some jokes.
Pass that one around.
Anybody care for some butter for the potatoes?
Oh.
Give me a wing here. Set her down.
Okay, we'll make it.
I got another one for you, too.
Thank you. Henry,
Who else
your
wants a
chair.
leg?
Thank you.
That's why them guys don't want to come up there. They want to see us eating and drinking.
That's it.
Your doctor.
Hi, guys.
Hi there.
Does anybody want some pie?
Oh, love
Yeah, I think I can bring that.
What kind is it?
Hey, how's that chicken?
Apple. Chicken's good.
Chicken's
Well,
Well, it's been kind of nice. We invited some of the subcontractors that work on the log cabin over for a cookout tonight. Just have to get the pie down there.
Let's get it cleaned up. Yeah, how they get their phone in it?
Give me a Dr. Pepper.
Right, I am hungry.
here.
All right, look at that pie.
All right.
All right, everybody.
Henry, you want a piece?
Everybody smile, say cheese for the camera.
What a job. Great job there. Thank you. Right. Go.
Oh, love it. Thanks, guys.
Huh?
Well, that should give you a pretty good overview of the assembly and finishing of a log home. There's quite a bit involved, but if you work with a quality log builder like we did, it should all fit together.
Right, and if you've got a hankering to cut, notch, and assemble your own logs, there are plenty of schools around the country that can teach you just how to do that.
So good luck with your project, and thanks for watching. I'm Dean Johnson for Hometime.
And I'm Joanne Liebler.
Hometime is made possible by Chevy Truck. Who brings you? Chevy full-size pickups. Today's big pickups for professionals and do-it-yourselfers. Chevy S-Series pickups. Today's compact pickups that play as hard as they work. Chevy's Astro all-wheel drive. Today's mid-size van with standard 4-wheel anti-lock brakes. Chevy Trucks. The most dependable, longest-lasting trucks on the road. The National Hometime PBS series is made possible by the Stanley Works. Since 1843, Stanley's been committed to building quality tools and other products to help you do things right.